from Tbilisi is that
McCain speaking in Ottawa today. Now, McCain's visit to Canada at the height of an election campaign is unprecedented and, according to my next guest, a clever political ploy. Chris Sands is an expert on Canada-U.S. relations. He's with the Hudson Institute, and he's here in studio. And, Chris, I just want to mention to our viewers, by the way, we're expecting John McCain to scrum with reporters, and we're also going to bring that to them live. Now, let me just ask you, what do you think is behind this? John McCain coming to Ottawa, I think, you probably know best, I don't know whether there has ever been a U.S. presidential candidate that has come to Canada in the middle of a presidential campaign. What's going on here?
Well, certainly you're right. There's never been anything like this before. He's making history, but he's also making a very important point, because what comes through for Americans from this video is a picture of John McCain looking presidential in the capital of one of our greatest friends, being respected and showing he knows the issues. What most Americans will get from this is John McCain is ready on day one. The contrast, unspoken in most of this speech, is that Barack Obama, although a very compelling figure, has some learning to do, could be too inexperienced for the job of president at this crucial moment.
And it's interesting because in that speech, while it was veiled and while it was subtle, when he talked about abrogating an agreement or demanding unilateral changes, that had to be a subtle jab, if not so subtle jab, at Barack Obama.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, you can tell that the Obama team felt this punch coming. They very quickly leaked an interview Barack Obama had done with Fortune magazine, trying to repudiate that position that had come out against NAFTA. He's clearly worried that the effect of this kind of a speech and subsequent speeches McCain plans for Colombia, in South America, some of the European countries, will be combined to make McCain look like a statesman who knows what he's doing and Obama look like he's still learning.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that. Apparently Obama saying, as you said, to Fortune magazine, sometimes during campaigns the rhetoric gets overheated and amplified. So it appears as though that leak that went around to diplomatic circles was in fact perhaps true.
Yes, and Canada has took some bad heat for that, even in the United States, as people worried Canada was interfering in the election. Not true. I think this was something that had come out. The campaign is a very strong campaign. Barack Obama's done amazing things so far this year. However, he's tried to run an outsider's campaign, not the usual Washington war horses, most of whom were working for Hillary Clinton. So he has an experience gap even in his campaign, and McCain is going to exploit every weakness. If you're the oldest candidate, you've got to say age isn't a problem, experience is a benefit, and I think that's what McCain's doing here.
Do you think that we're going to see Barack Obama coming to Canada as well during this presidential campaign?
It'll be interesting. McCain's challenged him to go to Iraq, challenged him to go to Afghanistan, and even challenged him to join weekly town hall meetings every Thursday. Obama so far has missed every one of them, and as that adds up, you can't pass a class if you don't show up. And I think Obama is made, put on the defensive by this, and Canada, even though it's an important ally, is to some extent a backdrop, a bit of a prop in McCain's messaging to the American people here today.
You know, it's interesting. If you see some polling, you'll see that Barack Obama hugely popular in Canada. If he were running here against McCain, he'd probably win with maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the votes, something like that. But what Canadians may not know is that if they are true supporters of NAFTA, John McCain's presidency actually might be better for Canada than Barack Obama. What's your opinion on that?
Well, in terms of free trade, Canada depends on those agreements. I think that Senator Obama is going to modify his position. He won't scrap NAFTA. But the fact is he doesn't know the Canadian relationship well. He doesn't know the trade well. Much more worrisome, his position on energy. He's talked about moving away from dirty oil and eliminating U.S. oil imports by 2030 by 100%. Now, McCain, as he was signaling here with cap and trade, something Canada's experimenting with, but that the United States still hasn't adopted, he's talking about an approach to avoid allies that are dangerous, the Iranians and others, where if we're going to move away from foreign oil, we start moving away from dangerous oil first, conflict oil. Obama has said, let's move away from dirty oil. Not an small thing.
The oil sands in Alberta that would be targeted
oil
there,
sands in Alberta, exactly. Canada really has a stake in the outcome of this election. I think most Canadians look at American politics through the lens of, the coverage that they get, and they say, this is the person I would vote for if I were voting here at home. What they should think about a little bit is, who's in Canada's best interest. And that may be a different person than who you might find the most appealing.
And another interesting element of this is that a presidential candidate can speak all he wants about being a true free trader. If he doesn't have the cooperation of Congress, it doesn't really matter, does it?
That's going to be a tough part. Congress is very protectionist at the moment. It's unlikely to change in the next election. We see that among Republicans as well as Democrats. Many of the Republicans in the current caucus came up from grassroots. They're populists. They're close to small business. They're skeptical about free trade. So it's a bipartisan problem. McCain is going to make that tough. He's talked about getting rid of earmarks, the bridge building and special grants for cow flatulence studies that help grease the wheels back home and keep constituents ready to re-elect their congressmen and senators. McCain has said, I'm going to put a war on that. I'm going to stop every single one of those earmarks from getting through by vetoing every bit of legislation that has an earmark. That's going to be a war with Congress. On the other hand, some people in Washington are talking about Senator Hillary Clinton not being the VP on the Democratic ticket, but becoming the new Senate Majority Leader, instantly becoming the most powerful Democrat in Washington, and if Obama is elected, the person through whom Obama has to go to get all of his policies enacted. So that could set up a difficult relationship between him and Congress as well, even if it is Democratic.
It was also interesting to hear him talk about trade. I think he said that there's more trade that goes across the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor than all of American exports to Japan. And yet John McCain has really positioned himself as the candidate for national security, for tight borders, making sure that terrorists don't cross the border. So how does he, those would seem kind of opposing forces, how does he square that circle?
Well, I mean, this has been the U.S. problem, and McCain was not an open borders guy, but a guy for security that didn't get in the way of trade. But because he's an Arizona senator, during the debate about immigration reform earlier this year,
Chris, sorry to interrupt you. You saw me. You could tell that we were going to go to John McCain, and he is speaking to reporters. Let's listen in live.
Graham.